Can Chile do the same and win their first Copa America? What a mind to win it! And Chile is champion!
Welcome to the Chilean Football Show on the Red One TV.
Welcome to episode 8 of the Chilean Football Show. I'm Thomas F, and joining me is my co-host Matias Grez. We are a 1-hour show dedicated to Chilean football in English about La Roja, Primera División, Chileans abroad, and everything in between. We are in partnership with our friends from Chile Today News. Matias, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. Winter is gone here in London and spring is here. So the days are getting longer and everybody's in a much better mood. How are you?
Good. You know what? I can actually relate the same with the weather being the way it is in Toronto and Southern Ontario. Lots to discuss. Lots has happened in the last 2 weeks. We'll start with the major news happening around the region. FIFA and CONMEBOL got together and decided to cancel all qualifiers. Obviously, the FAs didn't want to play in Europe. Now, for Chile, is that a good thing or a bad thing, knowing that Martín Lasarte has just come in?
I mean, I think it's great, actually. We lamented how slowly the ANFP had appointed him and how long the hiring process had taken and how long it had taken to get rid of Rueda. So this has I think, bought them more time and bought him, more importantly, more time, Lasarte, to get to know his players. Obviously, he's only able to work with the domestic players that he's called up at the moment. But my main concern going into the qualifiers that would have been at the end of this month were that he would have had very little time to get to know his players. And, for all the scouting he would have done from a distance before taking over, you don't really know what you're working with until you're there in the thick of it. So I think in the short term especially, but maybe in the medium term, this benefits, this group of players, this national team, and gives him more time to get to know them.
And not only does it give him more time, but honestly, as you said, as we discussed it earlier, ANFP literally appointed him 3 weeks to Chile had to make a nomination for this March window against Ecuador and Paraguay before being cancelled. But Martín Lasarte also gets a chance to not only scout the players, but obviously with COVID and everything, in normal times, certainly, before the pandemic started, Rueda would go out to Mexico, he'd go out to Europe, he'd go out to Argentina, he'd go out to Brazil, and certainly scout and track the players that he had a sight on. This gives Lasarte maybe a chance to sort of get more comfortable in the role, as opposed to just speed things up and not do it well.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I mean, I think what's most important is, technology these days with clubs and federations around the world is second to none. And I don't think, necessarily scouting the players abroad in Europe and Mexico, for example, would be too difficult, but it's building those personal relationships with the players. Rueda, like we said, for all his faults on the pitch, he always had a really good relationship with the senior players off the pitch. And that, I think, especially with a team and a group of players that have been as volatile as Chile's have in the past, building a relationship and building that respect between the coach and the senior players in the squad is one of the most important parts of making sure they're successful. So, he wouldn't have had the opportunity to do that, to build those relationships on those personal visits to different continents. So, I'm kind of on the flip side, on the health side of it, we'd spoken at the end of last year, or maybe 3/4 of the way through last year, that we were surprised these qualifiers, the international windows in general were still going ahead, given that most countries around the world were experiencing their second spikes of COVID at the time. It didn't seem sensible to have hundreds of players meeting and flying across the world to different continents. So, on in that respect, it's, a good decision, but, one that's probably taken a few months too long to make. It would have been, would have been ideal to do it at the end of last year.
Now, we know how it impacts Chile. In a way, it gives more time to Martín Lasarte and his coaching staff. But overall, how does it impact the South American qualifiers? Because at the end of the day, these 2 games will have to be played. I just don't know where CONMEBOL are really going to shoe in these 2 games. Maybe they'll have to add some sort of window in June or July in the midst of the summer. or maybe January, or I just don't know what exactly CONMEBOL has planned. But do you really think it was a reasonable decision for the South American FAs to decide not to play in Europe? At the end of the day, even if they would have played in South America, they would have played with little or no fans. The situation, for example, in Brazil is horrendous. I don't know how Brazil would have played any games there. In some parts of the region, it's improving. But realistically, do the FAs at all, did it really benefit them money-wise? Because here's the also thing. If the qualifiers would have been played in Europe, that would have been a significant amount of money spent, too. It's not just about health and restrictions.
Oh, for me, the decision isn't about money at all. I mean, these federations can find money wherever they want to, whenever they need it. I mean, for me, it's about, the integrity of the qualifiers in South America. I mean, for some reason, we think it's, for example, the Libertadores that was played in Europe. If you think on the contrary, would they ever, move a Champions League final to South America? And the answer is obviously no. So I think for the integrity of the competition, whether you're going to have fans or not, it is farcical to think that you can play South American World Cup qualifiers in Europe. I mean, even for example, just one extreme example, Bolivia have a huge advantage playing at home, and that's in the altitude is where they get their most of their wins against some of the biggest teams on the continent. I mean, what are they going to think if they're going to go and have to play and lose that home advantage in Europe? It's for me, it's not about the money. It would be farcical if they moved any of the qualifiers to Europe. I mean, they're South American World Cup qualifiers. They need to be played in South America. Like you say, it definitely does lose its history because there is no comparison to playing in altitude in La Paz, in Medellin. That has its own tradition, in a sense. And like you mentioned there, even though maybe Argentine fans in Buenos Aires weren't too pleased about Libertadores final being moved to Madrid, it certainly did make it a spectacle of sorts. Obviously, the European media were there and covering that event, and or in the scheme of things, organization-wise, it helps, but it definitely loses its tone. I want to ask you about, we knew, for example, the Edison Cavani was rumored not to come to Uruguay's national team, for example, and some people had said that had to do with the UK COVID strain, but no, he is suspended for 2 games. In the microcycle for Chile, Lasarte is working with the local players, and he called up a list of 25 players, some young, some not old. We know that in the beginning, when he took over, he said that he would leave, quote, all doors open to all players, and he certainly has showed that with his first call-up. A very young squad, but, it really surprises me to see a guy like Luis Jimenez, a 36-year-old, right now playing in Palestino, has had a great career abroad, and especially with Inter in Europe, but he's the player with the most call-ups on this list. Behind him is Brian Cortés and Brian Carrasco in the same club. But does it surprise you to see a 36-year-old Luis Jimenez in the squad? No, not at all, actually. Funnily enough, I think we mentioned when Lasarte took over and he said, that quote you mentioned there about leaving all doors open. We said Luis Jimenez, is with a chance of making the squad, despite, being way older than some of the younger generation coming through. But I think we're at a stage now with the Chilean national team that age doesn't matter. We're not rebuilding for the future anymore. I think that's very clear. I think, the Lasarte being hired was a sign that the ANFP were just determined in the short term to qualify for the World Cup in Qatar. That is the bottom line. And, when was hired, it was all about recambio, bringing through the young players, phasing out golden generation. I think we can safely say now that isn't the case. And considering how desperate for goals the Chilean national team is at the moment and how misfiring all the strikers are that they've signed up over the last 4-6 international games. I mean, regardless of age or not, Jimenez has been one of the best forwards, if not the best, in the domestic league. And if the goals aren't coming from anywhere else, if they're not coming from the players that you back in Mexico, if they're not coming from Eduardo Vargas anymore, then, why not go with somebody with experience and somebody in form and somebody that can, perhaps be the one in the short term to score the goals that we need to qualify.
Now, a player that actually is in the microcycle and has a cap, as opposed to all the other 20 players that don't have a cap, is a 20-year-old forward, Carlos Palacio. He plays for Unión Española. In the 2020 season, he had 8 goals in 33 appearances in Primera División. He had a great game against Independiente del Valle of Ecuador in the Copa Libertadores. Multiple outlets in Chile are saying Carlos Palacio is rumored to be headed to Inter of Porto Alegre in the Brasileirão. You just mentioned it there. We're desperate for goals, and he looks like he's a very exciting forward, and watching him play, he kind of brings a different feel to the Chilean player.
I completely agree. I mean, it's been a long time since I was as excited by a Chilean prospect as I am with Palacios. I mean, he's such a brilliant player to watch, but also he's highly effective and has obviously been the standout player now for at least the last year with Unión Española. Obviously was meant to have already moved to Internacional. That fell through, but again, it looks like it's going to happen now. And that Libertadores match against Independiente was essentially a shop window. It was a difficult game for Española, but he was, the one shining light there. He was the one player again that looked likely to do something. And obviously the one criticism that you could have put towards him would be that, he wasn't scoring many goals for, he had everything. He had, his vision and his final pass in the final third are brilliant. And obviously the assists come with that. But the one criticism was that he didn't score goals, but he's added goals to his game now. He's started to add goals to his game now. So, we've spoken in the past about the Chilean talents that have left too soon or made the wrong move to Europe too early or to big clubs too early and never played again. Obviously, we have good memories of Internacional, developing Aranguis recently. So, as long as he's guaranteed some playing time there, I'm confident this seems like a good move for him, and also a move at the right time, more importantly. He's established himself over a couple of seasons here. He's clearly proved that he's, far too good to stay in this division. So all in all, it's a move I'm excited about and a player I'm really looking forward to seeing develop.
The difference with me, with Carlos Palacio as opposed to Rojas, when Rojas was sold by Universidad de Chile to a Serie A club, it almost seemed like La U was not doing any favors to the young kid. It just seemed like they were just trying to get rid of their own debts. This in other case seems like Carlos Palacio is ready for football abroad, and it's not rushed. It's not a rushed decision.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, I think that's the problem that we've had for quite some time now. I mean, we've had essentially 2 generations that have gone missing since the golden generation, which is why now we're struggling to field a competitive team in some places of the pitch. And like you said, it does seem, given the financial state of some of the teams in the country, that, whenever they get a significant offer for one of the young players, it's kind of a no-brainer to take it because it helps balance the books. But like with Rojas, I mean, on the face of it, it's a good move. I mean, a move to Europe shouldn't be sniffed at. But, for his own development and then subsequently the impact that could have on the national team, in the medium term, in the long term, is it the right move? And I think we've seen kind of over and over the last few years that those moves have never quite worked out. So like you said, this doesn't feel like that. This feels like it's a move at the right time. So I'm hopeful that, he can turn into the player that I think he can be and then, provide some attacking spark that the national team desperately needs.
Now, the Chilean Players Association, also known in Spanish as CIFUP, has stopped the Chilean League. They've met with ANFP, they've met with FIFPro, they met with FIFA, and they're hoping to get their support against ANFP. It's very concerning. The first game was scheduled for 21st of this month in the Super Cup. It's not just the first division, also Primera B and Segunda División. All players hoping for the irregularities to stop and for NFP to really get their act together. I think it would be shameful to see if the Chilean league can also repeat what happened last year. Let's not forget, the Chilean league went over 200 days without playing, and what it did to the players. I mean, can you imagine 200 days without playing? It really made the players not only rusty, match fitness and whatnot, but the players weren't allowed to train for a long period of time. It wasn't until several attempts by NFP happened, and then when they were given the green light, the women had to wait even longer. So how much damage would this really cause if in a way you also have to find fairness with the players and the association, but in a way you also want an outcome that benefits both sides, and at the end of the day, for the fans and media alike, can enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, and they've not got a long time to sort it out. I mean, as of recording, 8 days until the Super Cup is due to take place, which would also be impacted by this decision. And obviously, just to explain, essentially it stems from clubs in Segunda, the third division, not being happy with only being awarded what they call a half a promotion place. So the champion in the third division wouldn't be guaranteed a promotion into the second division. Instead, they would have to play against the team in a playoff from the second division, from the bottom of the second division, for a place in the second division. Essentially, it stems from, the issue of COVID over the last season with teams not being relegated due to the pandemic holding up the season. So now the NFP wants to essentially redress the balance of the number of clubs in each division. So that is the root of the issue. And like I said, only 8 days until the season officially starts to sort it out. So, it's a crucial time to essentially make sure that, like you said, we don't have another lengthy break in the season, which is something, every league around the world suffered from. But, this would just be, add salt into the wounds. And obviously the recent takeover with TNT Sports taking over CDF, obviously they'll be wanting, the biggest clubs, the biggest fixtures to be, especially that Super Cup, to be broadcast.
Absolutely. And moving on, the big three, there's been a lot of development with the big three. And let's start with Colo Colo. We had mentioned in the last episode, they saved themselves from relegation, and they're not joking around. Gustavo Quinteros, with his assistant, Walter Lema, have sat down on the table and decided the players that they do want, and they didn't hesitate long, signing Miiko Albornoz, Martín Rodríguez, to the team, and several others. This is a team that now can really project itself after getting rid of all its old players that were taking up significant amount of salary. Let's not forget, Colo Colo get $4 million a year by Adidas. So they have to invest the money correctly. But these two players alone, Miiko Albornoz and Martín Rodríguez, coming back from Mexico. Albornoz obviously playing in Germany for Hanover in the second division of Germany. These two Chilean players alone can really help the team not only get out of relegation. I mean, they've already gone out of relegation, but even be top half, no?
So I think we spoke last year, at the end of last season, that Colo Colo had, one of the biggest rebuilding jobs that they've ever had. So, aside from almost getting relegated in that relegation playoff, it was a case of, too many old stars on big salaries that, were past their prime. So we were essentially saying, what can they do to rectify that? And we spoke in the previous podcast about them cutting off the big names straight away, which I think was a good move. And then obviously, like you say, bringing in the likes of Martín Rodríguez, who is a brilliant player by all accounts, especially for the level that Colo Colo want to be at. I think he's 26 now, a player we maybe expected more to develop from, after performing well in the Confederations Cup. Hasn't necessarily happened. So I think, for this level, for Chilean football, I think that's a great signing. Miiko Albornoz as well, we know has international experience, has experience in Europe. Just how good, we spoke pre-pod about him not having a contract now for more than 6 months. So, what's his level going to be? Why wasn't he picked up by clubs in Europe? But I think, someone with his experience should, again, be more than good enough for what Colo Colo are trying to do. And then obviously, probably one of the most exciting signings for them would be Juan Carlos from Cobresal, comes off the back of a brilliant season. Youngster, which is what, we said was important for them to target, to really build for the future. And, they have the advantage that, he has already, performed in the first division. They're not really taking any risks. Always there's some element of risk with a player stepping up to play for, the biggest club in the country. But I think, they've, made all the moves in the right direction so far to ensure last season doesn't happen again. And I'd expect them to maybe make a few more moves before we start again.
Yeah, so this is the kind of signings that Colo Colo really need to really be at the level that they want to be. One of their goals is to really come back to South American competitions, maybe starting off with the Copa Sudamericana and then maybe getting on to the Copa Libertadores. We kind of missed this news as we were recording. It had happened just a couple of days after, actually. Gustavo Poyet, new head coach of Universidad Catolica. He has a lengthy trajectory. He's been coach of Real Betis, Shanghai Shuangha in China, AEK in Athens, Sunderland, and where he also played as a player in Brighton. But his last coaching experience was actually in Bordeaux of League One, and that was 3 years ago. How much is that going to impact really his performance as a head coach of El Tricampeón?
Well, I don't know what you think, but seems like a strange hiring. We'd spoken about, we eulogized about Catolica over, recent podcasts about how they're sort of, the pinnacle of Chilean football at the moment, both, as a sporting institution as a whole and the decisions they take as well as on the pitch. So, like you said, a manager with a patchy record, I think it's fair to say, especially here in England, didn't leave with the greatest of reputations, and obviously 3 years in between coaching jobs seems like a strange hire, and seems like they've gone for something of a name. So I can't, but who am I? They're a club that have made essentially every major decision they've made over the last 3 years has been the right one. So, who am I to say that this is the wrong one? They have experience of doing all the right things. They wouldn't be 3 times, back-to-back champions if they didn't, and with different managers at that. So, it will remain to be seen, but, it's, an exciting move, and for him, I'm sure, 3 years out, we'll be looking forward to managing again.
Now, I know this was 7 years ago, but he did coach in the Premier League with Sunderland. And I know a long time has passed. He was actually at one point, depending on how true the report actually came from a newspaper, he was actually rumored to be the head coach of NFP. That was quickly shut down as no new development happened. But maybe Catolica are getting him at an off price, considering how long he has been off as a coach for. Catolica rivals Universidad de Chile have also been making several developments, signing Tomás Rodríguez from Unión La Calera and Ramon Arias from San Lorenzo. Funny enough, Universidad de Chile playing San Lorenzo later on. La U actually just qualified for Libertadores in the Chile third spot by no more than a point after Palestino blew it in the dying couple of games of the Primera División. Can these two signings really make La U go even higher? I mean these two players, Tomás Rodríguez, I'm actually surprised that he wasn't at a bigger club all these years.
Yeah, we've spoken about obviously coming from La Calera, and Jonathan Andia as well, another name I have to add, also coming from La Calera, who we've spoken about having a really, pushed Catolica, quite close for the title last season. And they had that knack of finding the right players. Obviously, Rodriguez slightly younger than Andia, but they had the right infrastructure in place to find those players and develop those players. And essentially, as is the case in every country around the world, the bigger clubs in the league tend to benefit from players developing at smaller clubs in the league. And that certainly happened here. And essentially, I think I counted 8, 6, 7 signings for them. So, this is essentially a rebuild in Dudamel's image. And, he did well with the team when he came in, very well, solidified them, made them hard to play against. And I think, this is certainly a case of him bringing in the talent that he wants to make this his team, because I don't think it was last season, it's fair to say.
Yeah, he definitely came in last season almost half blinded by the team that he had, with none of those players being of his signings. One name I do want to add is Marcelo Canete, 30-year-old attacking midfielder from Argentina. Played for Boca Juniors early on in his career, 10 years ago. Comes from Cobresal after scoring 6 goals there. Maybe this could be the replacement. Maybe they're looking for the 36-year-old forward that they're lacking so many goals in. Joaquin Larrebe.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, sometimes it just takes players a few years longer to develop, and it just so happens that they end up, later in their career finding somewhere they feel comfortable, finding somewhere that feels like home. And they kind of show the talent that people had thought they would, earlier on in their career. But I completely agree with you. I think that's a brilliant signing. I think he was arguably their Cobresal best player last season. And, like I said previously, it's the case of, Laúb essentially benefiting from player development at smaller clubs. And I'm really excited to see all of these players put together to play for them. Obviously, given that the season does actually go ahead as planned. But I think, if you're a Laúb fan, I think, with Dudamel in charge and, now, 6, 7 players that he's signed to play for him, I think it's a really exciting time.
That is for sure. Other signings in Primera División include a very surprising move, I have to say. Carlos Carmona and Joan Bosellur going to Coquimbo Unido. Coquimbo Unido playing in Primera B. Carmona and Bosellur have had a great career. Not only abroad, but also with the Chilean national team. And one that, I'm sure you're very excited about, Matias Fernandez, to La Serena, Julio Barroso to Everton, Colo Colo legend, and Esteban Paredes, retiring after this season, after he had said earlier that he was going to be retiring after the previous season. He then, goes back on his word and decides to, sign with Coquimbo Unido as well. And this is all only rumor, but Octavio Rivero, there were some rumors that he'd be coming back to Colo Colo. That seems like it's not the case. He is definitely linked to Unión La Calera.
Obviously, and just to add, Jorge Valdivia going to La Calera as well.
That's right.
So it's been a big off season for some of Chile's bigger names, obviously aging names, but bigger names. Being a La Serena fan, the reports were we were going to sign Bosellur, Carmona, Valdivia, and, all of those eventually fall through. And you go from being really excited to a bit, disappointed and wondering what you're going to do in the transfer window. And then all of a sudden, out of absolutely nowhere, they announced the signing of Matias Fernandez. So, never, in my life did I expect to see Matias Fernandez playing for La Serena. But, we spoke last season. If I was to analyse it with my head, not my heart, obviously my heart says I'm very excited to see him play. But, we spoke last season about how much he struggled to perform to the level he was previously able to play at for Colo Colo. Injuries obviously played a huge part in that. So the concern is always what level is he going to be able to reach now? And on the flip side, Suazo and Jaime Valdez joining last season, my fears were, they were in their late 30s, 38, 39. My concern was, they wouldn't be motivated. They're just looking for, maybe a final payday in the first division. But, they ended up being two, if not the two best players for La Serena last season to essentially help them avoid relegation. So, if they can do a similar job with Matias Fernandez this season, I'll be absolutely delighted.
And I believe we already discussed it earlier, but Alejandro Chumacero, Bolivian international with Unión Española, and one player that I actually idolized growing up because of the 2007 U20 World Cup that happened in Canada, Christopher Toselli signing with Palestino. Seems like there is no space for him at Católica with Matias Arturo as the undisputed number one goalkeeper there. Now, I want to discuss about the goalkeeper situation. So we already know that Bravo is will retire at some point. Brian Cortés looks like the number two taking over. But Chile hasn't, for the most part, Chilean clubs have very aging goalkeepers. I think that the age really shows. But La Serena goalkeeper Sagres Lopez is 22 years old, and last year he played 30 games. I'm really excited to see what this player can really do, and I also hope that he doesn't stay in the Chilean league too long.
I mean, it's always the worry, isn't it? We kind of say about our fear of players leaving too soon, but then also staying too long. I mean, I think the staying too long, I think Christopher Toselli is probably the poster boy for that. I mean, he was the next big thing coming through, behind Bravo, stayed at Catolica, didn't leave until his late 20s, had an absolute disaster abroad in a very short spell, and came back very quickly. So, there's a fine line. I think, like we've said before, I think one season is probably too soon. If he impresses again this season, then, you'd maybe think a move to one of Chile's big clubs could be on the card. And then a year or two after that, when he's, mid-20s, 24, 25, a move to a bigger South American club. We're in a position where the timeline for Chilean goalkeeper is probably accelerated because of Bravo's age, because of his injury concerns. We know he said himself he's going to retire after the World Cup in Qatar. And, me, myself, and a few people don't trust Arias and Cortés as the backup keepers. So, we are, like you said, sort of on the hunt for the next big thing, to kind of fill his shoes. But I don't think we should rush that process if it's not for the best in the long term.
Absolutely. I mean, Toselli, he actually had interest from Russia early on in his career. At one point, he was actually recommended by Bravo to Real Sociedad. Real Sociedad actually pick up Germano Rulli from Estudiantes de La Plata. But yeah, isn't it not very obvious, because Toselli did stay in Chile for too long, and then when he finally did decide to go abroad, he only played 8 games with Atlas in Liga MX and then right back to Chile. I would love to see Lopez really, like you say, move to Chile top 3 club, and then maybe go to either Argentina, Brazil, MLS, or even Europe, and Holland, Portugal. Any of these leagues would be great to see him there. Now, we were talking about La U signing Ramon Arias from San Lorenzo. Universidad de Chile played San Lorenzo just 3 nights ago and tied at home 1-1 with Angelo Enriquez scoring the 76th minute. Funny enough, a player that some people may have thought that he was over. Certainly not the case. The return leg happening on the 17th, 4 days from now, from the time of recording, in Buenos Aires. How are you feeling about La U's chances of moving on? We know that San Lorenzo has great players, and just overall what's meant for them, because obviously in terms of on paper, San Lorenzo's squad is worth a lot more than La U.
Well, I think it's going to be difficult for them to qualify. Certainly not out of the question, don't get me wrong, but I think there was a real missed opportunity in that first leg. Obviously, San Lorenzo going down to 10 men, and then, La U taking the lead, and then you would think, at home, keep a clean sheet, a late goal, like you said, in the 76th minute, and then they go and concede 2 minutes later, switch off completely, go and concede the equaliser 2 minutes after scoring the opener against 10 men. All of a sudden, it's, they have the away goal, and it's far more balanced in San Lorenzo's favour going into the second leg. But I think, like I said, it will be difficult, but not impossible. I think there were certainly flashes in that game that Universidad de Chile have the quality to go through. I mean, they dominated possession. There were some really good periods of dominant passing and chance creation. But I think, the odds are, I think it's fair to say, stacked against them to go through.
It is difficult because they are returning to Buenos Aires, and San Lorenzo's home record has been exceptional. But touching on Carlos Palacios' move after that game, Unión Española actually won the game 1-0 against Independiente del Valle. Now they have to go back to Ecuador. You think Unión Española have a bigger chance of moving on than maybe La U?
I think so. I think if Diego Sanchez plays as well as he did in that first game, they'll certainly have a chance. I think it's fair to say that they were perhaps lucky to come away with a 1-0 win. I don't think it's unfair to say Independiente, dominated, had a lot of chances. It was no surprise that Diego Sanchez came out as man of the match. And, like I alluded to earlier, most of Española's limited chance creation came through Palacios, who we know it sounds like is due to leave imminently. So, I'm sure the manager said after the game, if he could wait a few more weeks before making that move, that would be ideal, because I think he really is key to them, being able to create chances and get that away goal when they play the return leg.
So moving on to Copa Libertadores Femenina, two Chilean clubs who have made history in the case for Universidad de Chile and Santiago Morning. They played 3 games total in group stage, starting with Santiago Morning. They faced off against a very, very strong Boca Juniors side, tied them 1-1, tied 0-0 against Kinnerman of Brazil, and just absolutely destroyed Deportivo Trópico of Bolivia. They didn't top the group. They finished second behind Boca Juniors with 5 points. And Universidad de Chile, in their case, they topped their group, beating Peñarol 1-0, Libertad 5-0, and lost 4-1 against Ferroviária of Brazil. Now, both clubs are scheduled to play in the quarterfinals, and it's the first time in history that 2 Chilean clubs from the women's league has made it this far. Santiago Morning are playing tomorrow, actually, against Corinthians in Buenos Aires. And a day after that, Universidad de Chile are going to play against Santa Fe of Colombia. A very positive, Matias, for the growth of Chilean women's soccer. And, who knows, maybe 1 or 2 players could be scouted out of these 2 teams and maybe shipped a bot to European clubs that could help the La Roja Femenina.
It just goes to show, doesn't it, what happens when clubs here. I don't think we can accuse Santiago Morning of never taking women's football seriously. They've kind of been at the forefront of that in Chile. But, once, resources are put into it, once, time and dedication is put into it, we're kind of reaping the benefits now. And, across the board, there were some brilliant individual performances. Santiago Morning's goalkeeper, the Chilean-American Ryan Torrero, who's, backup for Christian Endler, probably third choice keeper for the national team, had an absolutely outstanding game. 5 or 6 spectacular saves. And, we've always thought that, Endler is, as one of the best goalkeepers in the world, would never be touched. But it just goes to show what happens. We've always known that the talent is there. We were able to see at the World Cup in France that there was, despite the NFP lacking in recent years towards the development of women's football, that the talent was there. It was just about nurturing that talent and giving them the resources to be able to develop and compete with the best countries in the world. I think we're obviously a long way from that, but this essentially, I think, is a good starting block and kind of, like I said, goes to show the possibilities and the potential for these teams and these players going forward if they continue to take this seriously.
Now, this past month, actually, Mauricio Isla was named the best right back in the Brasileirão, beating a lot of very good players in that list. At his age, is he still as reliable as he is, not only for club but for country?
For me, I think you could easily put him up there with the likes of Bravo and Vidal as Chile's most consistent and most reliable performers during this golden generation, this period of the golden generation that we've had. I mean, it was, the two qualifiers we played, if I'm not mistaken, back in November. He missed the first one due to COVID protocols and came in for the second game. And, who would have thought that, a right back would have such a profound impact on the team as a whole? You maybe would have thought a central midfielder, an attacking midfielder could do that. But he came in and changed the team. I mean, the defensive stability, but I mean, most impressive as always is his attacking ability going forward and the link-up play he always has with Alexis. So for me, unless, we discover an absolute diamond out of nowhere, then, and even if we do, I think he is by some considerable distance, still the best, not right back we have, but one of the best players and most reliable players we have.
And not only was he named the best right back, he also won the Brasileirão with Flamengo. It just goes to show how competitive that league is. Funny enough, Inter de Porto Alegre, who are actually chasing them by just a couple of points. Guillermo Maripan, who has been scoring for fun, as Daniel Campos would put it, has been playing exceptionally well at Monaco, getting raving reviews by the French media. And we've discussed it many times before. Chilean defenders is but has been, I would say, one of our only, or if only our only strong point. And let's not forget, Maripan is only 26 years old. So I was actually upset when he actually, in the very beginning, when he moved from Deportivo Alavés to Monaco, because he wasn't playing at Monaco. But then he finally was given a new chance after Monaco did very poorly in his first season there. And, he scored against a club like PSG with Pochettino watching. For Maripan, is this sort of his ceiling, or you think this guy could aspire for more? I mean, in the media, they're saying they might even consider him playing up the field.
I mean, considering how desperate we are for strikers at the moment with the national team, it might be the worst idea. But it's so funny. I mean, how quickly things change in football. I mean, before those qualifiers, including the game against Venezuela, I mean, he, like you said, he hadn't been playing much. And when he came in, I mean, he looked really heavy-legged. He looked like a player that hadn't been playing very much and was kind of at fault for them nearly scoring really early on in that match. And I kind of said at the time, this is probably why he hasn't been playing. And then you look a few months later and he's arguably their best player. Like you said, he's scoring goals on top of that. So again, like you said, I mean, it's a position that Chile is probably the most blessed with in terms of talent at the moment. So if that's the case and he keeps scoring goals, he could be, you never know, he could turn into Martin Lasarte's secret weapon to fire us to.
Yeah, no, and not only that, but you could even put a combination of Sierra Alta, Kusevich, Diaz, and still have one or two center backs on the bench, essentially, or full backs. So maybe you consider Guillermo Maripan as a midfielder. I know he's been sort of playing more up the field for Monaco, so maybe that's something Lasarte wants to dive into. I want to mention Jorge Sampaoli. Happy birthday to him.
Yes.
One of
a legend.
Exactly, one of the most successful managers.
Ended bad, yeah. But I won't have a bad word to say about him.
And our condolences to Marco Salles, South African born, who recently had a heart attack. Recoveries to him. Matias, before we close out the show, let's talk about our two biggest players, Alexis Sanchez and Arturo Vidal. Their situation in Inter has been almost changing, not by the minute, but it seems to change week to week as far as who Antonio Conte really has at his disposal. I've recently been following the news from TNT Sports correspondent Enzo Oliveira, and it almost seems like Vidal and Sanchez may better be off at some other team because they don't seem to be in the plans of Conte. Certainly, Inter could be winning Serie A for the first time in a decade because Juventus has been having just an outstanding, an appalling season, not only in Champions League but also in Serie A. And this isn't the Juventus team that many people have been used to. When Vidal played at Juventus, nobody caught them. Things have certainly changed. The tables have turned. Vidal and Sanchez contract, when it expires, should they be looking at maybe going to another club?
Well, I think it's difficult to say at the moment. Obviously, Vidal had been, up until he had what sounds to be minor knee surgery, by all accounts, hopefully shouldn't be out for too long. I mean, I imagine he had that done because he knew he wouldn't be missing any of Chile's fixtures at the end of the month. But it's frustrating because he had kind of played himself into that midfield and had been playing really well, and was kind of, showing all the old qualities that kind of made him one of the best in his position, in Europe over the last decade. Sanchez's situation is slightly different, I think. Unfortunately, he's struggled for game time, and it's kind of he played 2 matches and scored, started 2 matches, scored 3 goals in 2 games in those matches to kind of still show that he's still got it, and he's a player, in my opinion, who probably shouldn't be on the bench. But when you have players, like Lukaku, who's without doubt one of the best strikers in the world at the moment, and the brilliant partnership he has with Martinez, it's hard. It is really hard to get into that front two, and I couldn't make a case for him to displace either of those players. So his contract situation going forward, if it's not looking like he's going to get any more game time with them at the end of the season, he's into his 30s now, and I'm sure the competitor he'll want to be playing somewhere regularly, and also somewhere that's looking for trophies. So I think we'll have to wait and see until this season pans out. I think both of them have still got big roles to play. There's a long time left in the season, and I don't think either of them would want to leave, given that they're not necessarily on the brink, but they're certainly on the right track to bringing a first Scudetto back to Inter for like you said, a decade.
Yes, and Inter actually have a 6-point lead on Milan right now, currently at the moment, in Serie A. It's interesting because when Inter play against the big clubs, for the most part, Sanchez and Vidal are on the bench, and right now, recently they played against a Parma side. Alexis Sanchez scored 2 goals to beat Parma 2-1, and he was subbed off, and Vidal was brought on in the 67th minute for Christian Eriksen. But they can do better, no? These are 2 players that should be playing every 90 minutes.
We would obviously say so. Given how much we love them and how much they've done for the national team over the years, we would certainly say so. But that Inter team now it's so talented, and not only is it talented, in the starting 11, they've got brilliant strength in depth. So, it's a case of essentially weighing up the situation. Do we want them to start because, they're Chilean? I think obviously yes. But on the other hand, Alexis in particular, I think is deserving of more game time. And I think, his I don't want to say lack of good performances. His lack of good performances are down to the fact that, how he's brought on with the final 10, 15 minutes left of the game. How are you supposed to find a rhythm? How are you supposed to find form if you're just given, bits and pieces of a game here and there? So, it's going to be difficult, but, like I said, the season's long, and with COVID still, really, out there, and, with the possibility of impacting leagues and squads, I think they're going to have to go through, the rotation quite a lot this season. So whether he's playing for a new contract there or he's essentially putting himself in the shop window elsewhere, I still think there'll be plenty of chances from this season.
And both of them have combined for only 2,000 minutes this season for Inter. Well, everyone, that's the episode for today. I want to thank everyone for listening. and watching us on YouTube and Spotify. Until next time, take care and stay safe.